one, live. So first of all, before we do anything else, I want everybody to wish Jesse Haller a happy birthday because Jesse's birthday is tomorrow. So if you're coming in, wish Jesse a happy birthday before you do anything else.
Oh, goodness.
Yes. Oh,
21
goodness.
years old tomorrow, Tom, finally.
21. Oh
21.
God,
Finally
I'm
made it.
35. I'm 35. I'm so much older.
You
than
don't look a day over 29.
Oh boy. So anyway, fly tires. We got Jesse Haller here today. Jesse is one of my fishing buddies and product developer for Orvis. Been with Orvis for how many years now?
It'll be December 1st.
6 years. And before that, Jesse worked in retail shops dealing with fly fishing gear and was also a guide in Colorado. So Jesse's experience, and Jesse is really the resident tightline Euro nymphing guru. I mean, we talked to George Daniel a lot, but George isn't on staff and he's busy. But Jesse is our man. Jesse has done competitive fishing. Jesse, when we want to know if there's trout in a particular riffle, we send Jesse in there first to find out if there's any trout, because if there are any trout in there, Jesse's going to catch them.
Well, that's quite an introduction, and maybe a little bit of a hyperbole, but I will take it.
Hyperbole? Me?
And yeah, it's good to be here. It's always fun to be on Facebook Live with you, so glad to be there. Oh my goodness, look at this banner. Oh, I shouldn't have said anything.
So anyway, we've been kind of blowing the lid off some secret flies of Orvis staff members, and we did Pete's secret space gulping a couple of weeks ago, which was fun. And now we're going to do one of Jesse's nymph patterns that Jesse developed. And although it's tied Euro style, you can certainly fish this any way you want. And we do, and most people do. They fish, jig style flies with an indicator, with dry dropper, with Euro. It doesn't matter how you fish it. It's a good nymph, and it's a quick sinking nymph. So Jesse, you want to talk a little bit about how you came up with the Pinkie?
Yeah, absolutely. This pattern, like a lot of, European nymphing patterns, certainly coming more from my competitive, years, a few years back, they're created and tied in a fashion that they're very uncomplicated. They have, certain things that trout seem to like, triggers on them that seem to get their attention. And so when you're tying these things, you don't want them to take more than 5 minutes. So you have a pattern that's relatively simplified, but has a few.
Because why do you want to tie these quickly, Jesse?
Well, because you're going to lose a fair amount of time. It's really, we are nymphing here, and specifically, European nymphing. You're trying to make, a fair amount of contact with the bottom or get very close to it. Thus, if it's a woody debris river, you're going to lose a lot. If it's a jagged rock river, you're going to lose a lot. And, you end up scenarios where you're fishing extremely light tippet, 7x at times that alone can just be some trouble. So this was actually created during a competition on the night before a competition, or the night after the first day or something like that, when I was fishing Spring Creek in State College, Pennsylvania. And I had noticed that the fish had reacted to a different pattern that I wanted to sort of like elevate it a little bit. I want to make it sink a little bit faster, and I wanted to give it a little bit more quote unquote bling. And it just so happened that a friend had just pulled out this 50,000 yard, industrial anodized pink wire spool that it was like, where in the world did you get that? You know, it like bought it from some, you know, Ukrainian thing, and it took 6 months to get there. And so like I wound a bunch of it on one of my extra spools that I had with me and took it. But I tied some of it, and I ribbed with it. And it's a very sort of like natural pattern, except for sort of the pink hits that I get away with. They're thin bodied. A lot of my, Euro nymphs, like they have either just thread bodies with just a little bit of dubbing on it. And, usually I oversize my beads in comparison to some people. So you're kind of seeing an amalgamation. And then what I did learn is that like Spring Creek and several other rivers that sort of have that glacial till color, that kind of aqua green, for some reason, this pattern seems to do well where in those, water types, whether it's certain days on the Missouri, so a local river or two that we have here that have that, Spring Creek in Pennsylvania is another example. But I find that if I have a river that sort of has that aquamarine color, that it seems to be a good option. And, we'll show it with a pink bead here, which is one way I tie it, but I also use a silver bead a lot for it as well, too, just depending on how much flash or unnatural look I want it to have. So, yeah. Was that good? A good sort of history. I could probably dig out the date. It was April of 2016. Ben Metcalf's table somewhere in State College.
And you don't fish competition anymore, right?
It's been some time, a couple years. I honestly, the talent and skill around me was getting really high, and I'm so dedicated to making the best product for Orvis. I just don't think I could give it the, and frankly, I just wasn't as good as a lot of the other people. So,
but what you learned in that from that competitive scene is certainly taught you and taught all of us by association a lot of new tricks and some new skills.
It was an exceptional learning experience, surrounded by just extremely talented individuals, and learned a lot from their fly tying. I mean, a lot of the cool things of those events were the nights of or the nights leading up to, where you were sitting with a few teammates, cranking flies, looking at patterns. And then after that first day, when everybody's like, well, this one worked or this one worked and this size, and they're only in this type of water, or, make sure you fish the dry dropper in this zone, or it's, it challenges you to adapt fast and also just opens your eyes. It's more than, when you're in an event that's really, highly focused on catch rates, shamelessly saying catch rates, that you're definitely looking at all the tools on the table. And so it was a crash course in how to catch trout, lots of trout for sure. So,
Jesse, I think I know the answer to this, but Joe wants to know what month is great to use this fly.
Well, I'm a big fan of the spring months, period. The way it's tied here, I think we're doing it on a 14. It's really good, but if you wanted to sort of shrink it down a little bit, be a great Betis option for the later part of the months, or the fall options, 18s and even 20s. If you can find the right beads, you probably get away from a jig hook at that point, but yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Shall we start?
Yeah, let's go.
Because you have a hard stop at what, 350, right?
Something like that, yeah.
That's not.
Yeah, I know a guy named Tom who might be able to let my boss know that why I was a few minutes late to catch
I don't have any pull with anybody at Orvis. You should know that by now. I don't have any pull. Okay, so we're going to start, as Jesse said, with a jig hook. Here's what the fly sort of is going to look like in the end. And we're going to start with a Orvis tactical jig hook, size 14. Now, yes, you can tie this on a non-jig hook if you want. But if you're going to tie it with a jig hook, you do need a slotted bead to get it on there right. And we're going to use an 1/8 inch here, which is, the kind of the heavier. You could also tie it with what's the next smallest size? 3/16, Jesse?
Yeah, 7/16.
7/16. So if you wanted something a little lighter, a little thinner water, and you didn't need to get as deep, you could tie it with a little bit smaller bead. Notice that the Orvis beads are now marked in millimeters. After we have been yelling about that for I don't know how long. So
it is definitely the way a lot of people refer to them.
Yeah, well, it's a lot easier to remember than fractions. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't have any specific love for the metric system over the imperial system, but it's just easier to keep track of when you got it in millimeters because I don't do fractions very well. So anyway, I'm going to take one of the pink beads, and they're pink, but they're almost like a gold or a copper, but they have a little bit different color. So we'll use the pink bead because that's what Jesse calls for, and we're going to find the round end, not the slotted end. Roll it around in your fingers until you find that round end, and then you poke it. Oops. I have to hold it kind of far away from my eyes. And then you slide it on the shank, and we'll put it in the vise and get it set up right.
And as you're rotating that bead around, it's sometimes it'll want to sit a little askew, but if you kind of keep playing with it, it'll seat all the way down to the eye, and it almost kind of falls completely in line with the falls just below the shank of the hook, as Tom has shown. There you go, right there.
Yeah, and you don't want
it took that little. Yeah,
and you don't want it there, right? You want it so that more of the mass is up there, right?
Yep.
And when you so that it rides upside down.
Exactly.
So when you jam your thread up against there, it's going to push that bead. You can see the slots on top. Let me turn this a little bit so you can see the slots on top like that. So I'm going to start my 8060 olive thread because we're going to build up a body. We don't want really thin thread here. We don't need it. So do you use 60 on a 14, Jesse?
It doesn't really matter. Like I said, I try to keep mine pretty thin. If I'm using 6, that's fine. I just have a tendency to kind of, try not to be careful to not layer it too much because it's a very thin body. And 8/0, it just depends. I usually use a dark olive or an olive color, and it's what thread I probably have still on my bobbin that I grab, but I'm guessing that it was a 8/0 or a 6/0.
Sounds like me.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way,
yeah, it's a 6/0 on this one.
Tying this fly, it's a really good idea to have 2 bobbins. People ask how many bobbins should I have, and probably a good idea to have at least 2 because you're gonna be tying a little red thread collar on there for a hot spot. You don't need to have a bobbin. You can wind the thread by hand, but it just saves you trouble. So
yeah, that's a great recommendation, Tom. And because I do this sort of, you're going to use it for the hot collar. There are ones where I use it for thread for ribbing as well as a different hot collar. So I'd have 3 bobbins kind of around. It's always good. Bobbins are not expensive. And if you're using one for a hot spot or floss or whatever, that doesn't break very easily. You don't need to have like a super, super nice one either. So, getting a couple bobbins at, $5-10, it's always nice to have a few of them because then you're not always trying to rethread a new color and a new color, especially if you have one you use more than, a color you use a lot.
I honestly find that the cheap bobbins work just as well as the expensive ones.
It's just really those really thin threads are the ones that I like to have, like, a ceramic tip on.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start the thread right behind the bead, and you can see that bead's going to wiggle around there, and so I'm going to start my thread, and then I don't know about you, Jesse, but I like to make sure the bead's up there, and then I just keep winding until the bead stops wiggling. Is that how you do it?
Yep. I mean, that's that is absolutely the easiest way to kind of handle that, and that's how I would typically, if I was whipping these out, I probably wouldn't even take the time to do it. But just before I started to seat everything towards the end, I might. So I think it's a good way to start, Tom, to keep everything aligned.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. You could do it toward the end too. And now I'm going to tie in my tails. I think I'll start in the middle. And the tails are CDL Coq de Leon. That's how you spell it. It's these are from Spain, but I don't think that's the way you would say chicken in Spanish. So I think it's kind of a combination of French and Spanish, what they call these.
I believe it's this bird is from a extremely specific region.
Yeah, in Spain.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like bourbon, right? It can't be bourbon unless it comes from Bourbon County.
Although I know that they are raising them in this country. Tom Whiting is raising some now in Colorado. Yeah. So that's what the feather looks like. And the reason we like these for tails is that they have really fine speckling, and they're also very durable. You could use speckled hen feathers for the tail. You could use grizzly hackle fibers. You could use partridge. But this stuff is more durable than a partridge feather. And what, three or four?
Yeah, that's perfect.
3 or 4. You pluck them off. Just pluck them off the stem.
And when I first started tying this, I actually used wood duck flank, and it was not durable, and it would fall out, and eventually you'd have a tail. And then CDL, but there's synthetic fibbits. There's a lot of different options. And I think it's the speckling, which you called out, Tom, that is the specific thing that you do kind of get from wood duck or mallard flank as well. But I agree, the CDL is by far the most durable natural tail option. Now, Tom, when you pick a distance or a length for tail, how do you go about doing that?
How long on the tail?
Yeah.
It's your fly. I'm asking you.
No, I was just wondering if you were. So the trick that I was always taught was, you get them tied into your, held like you're going to tie them on, and you basically about measure the shank of the hook. And then I shorten just a little bit less than the shank of the hook as the length of the tail. But any sort of standard mayfly tail length is just fine. But I was curious if you were going to echo that, or I thought that was a commonly known one.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
That's what I like. I like them just a little bit a little bit shorter than the shank of the hook. So I'm gonna start here and take a couple turns and see where your tails are, and you can always pull them one way or the other.
We do have a quick question.
How does that look, Jesse?
I love it.
About right?
Hey, Tom.
Okay. Yeah.
We have a question from Martin, and regarding the CDL, they're saying they have an old shaving brush that has badger hair. Would that be a reasonable replacement for CDL?
Sure. Absolutely.
Cool.
I don't know if I've held badger hair, and being from Wisconsin, that's kind of embarrassing to say.
Yeah, it would be a little coarser. It would be a little coarser than the CDL, but yeah, it would work. Sure. Any speckled fibers would work fine. All right, so I'm going to kind of pull those fibers a little bit toward me and up, just so that they don't roll to the far side of the shank. Now, Jesse, do you come down around the bend with your tails, or do you leave it sticking straight out?
I try to get them to stick straight out. That's just
okay. So you don't wind them down around the bend, so that they
usually do. But I would stop about right there, because we know we want to bring our wire or whatever ribbing material back down as well. And I usually overlap a little bit over where the tail ended. So I think where you are right now is a pretty good spot to stop.
Okay. So I'm going to cut this off here. And then I'm going to get my pink wire. pink ultra wire.
Yeah, it's the stuff.
And I didn't bring my wire cutters to the table, so I gotta grab them from my fly tying bench here.
And Tom, why do you use something different to cut the wire?
Because it dulls your scissors, and I like my scissors to be sharp.
I'm throwing you underhanded pitches. Just
yeah. I mean, even our fly tying scissors are expensive. I don't like cheap scissors. They don't work well, and they don't cut well, and they don't last. And even if you come way down into some people cut their wire way down in here. I may want to cut some bucktail or some deer hair with that sometime, and I just don't want to cut wire with it. Wire dulls them.
Yep.
All right, so going to tie in our pink wire. You tie it in right on top, Jesse?
Yep, you got it.
And right to the bead. And what I'm going to do is go forward to lash it to the shank. I can cover up those little butts. And now I'm going to go back and taper the body a little bit, right?
Yep, very minimal. So this is basically what you're trying to accomplish right here. And now all you're trying to do is kind of cover everything up at this point, right? So, yep, see, you just came back a little further, like it. And the goal here, too, is it's just a very, very slim profile. Yeah, you can add a little bit of taper as you're coming up towards the body. And then I really let the dubbing do a lot of the work for the upper part of the thing. So I don't even worry too much about tapering. Again, it's a relatively quick fly to tie.
Okay, so you wouldn't add any more taper than that to this?
No, pretty much once it's all covered, it's pretty good to go.
Okay. All right. And then we're going to rib. Going to take that wire and give it a little tweak to get it going. This wire is probably a little thick for this size, but it's actually the only pink wire I have.
Is this a medium?
I think it's like brassy or something.
Yeah. I typically do the small on this size, but
yeah, it's the only pink wire I had, so I gotta go.
All right. Oh, can I question this on you?
Yeah.
I see you're wrapping the wire in the same direction as you're wrapping your thread.
Yeah. Should I wrap it the other way?
It's a matter of preference, right? It's
all right. I'll wrap it the other way.
One thing I've always heard is if you wrap wire or ribbing the opposing direction, one, it's easier to sort of tie down, and two, it kind of reinforces a level of durability, especially on, sort of, something that's thin bodied like a thread bodied fly. So
I'm only going to get 3 turns there. Is that okay?
I love it. It's beautiful.
All right. And actually, Jesse, it's not true. It's not true that by counter wrapping it, you're going to tie it down. It's actually, you're actually going against it. You're pushing it back off. So that's not true.
See, now everybody can learn something today.
Yeah.
Including myself.
However, I didn't like the way it was bunging up those tails. So I think that it was a good idea to counter wrap it, but you're actually, you're winding the wire this way, right? You're winding the wire this way and your thread's going this way. So you're actually pushing the wire back. If I had wound it the same direction as the thread, then when I bound it down, I would be binding it down to make it stronger. So doesn't matter because we're going to cover this with epoxy anyways.
And also, too, if you ever use thread ribbing, like we were talking about as well, and in the example that you showed, with thread ribbing, the thread can sometimes start to slip in between the other pieces of thread. So counter wrapping thread over thread allows it to stay up a little bit more, which as another way if you ever thread rib.
And you'll notice I didn't helicopter that wire. I don't trust helicoptering.
Mm-hmm.
Where you do you do that? Where you
nope.
where you wind it around. I just don't trust it. I never know if the wire is totally bound down.
I just like smash it down with my finger a little bit, cover with a bunch of thread. Away you go.
Yeah, me too. Okay, then I know it's tied down. So now we're going to put a little UV cure thin. You use thin UV cure?
This is a thin. You're trying to get it to kind of soak in. You're going to watch the body darken a little bit, and it'll kind of bring out that pink contrast as the body darkens.
And I'd advise you to use a dubbing needle to put this on, because otherwise you can get too much on there. So I'm just going to make sure that I got it coated all around. And again, we don't want this body too thick. We just want to protect it and give it a little gloss. Of course, you can work some in there by the bead. That'll help hold the bead in place. All right, I think we're ready.
Looks good.
To hit it with the UV light.
Everybody, put your sunglasses on.
You could use head cement here. Don't look. Actually, I'll rotate the vise. That's why we have rotary vices, right?
That's right.
So we can do this kind of stuff. Okay. So that's nice and dry. Durable. Not going to go anywhere. Now we dub. Jesse calls for
SLF Squirrel Spiky Dub,
which was out of stock at Orvis. So I am using the Spectre Blend Nymph Dub, and I'm sure it's going to be just as good. What do you?
Yeah, the only that Spectre Blend is fantastic. It's really nice. That squirrel dub just has a little bit of that squirrel tail in there, so you get that sort of spiky. And this sort of allows me from not having to put a CDC collar on it to make it look a little more swimmy. The Spectre Blend should do it just fine. And typically what I do here is I really kind of mat out and open it up a fair amount before I dub it on. And then when I do dub it onto the thread, I go relatively lightly because I'm actually trying to get a lot of that sort of dubbing to get locked in, but not locked in super hard. So I can almost brush it or pick it out. So you can go down hard and then pick it out if you want to add some movement to the fly.
You don't spin it in a loop, do you?
No, I don't do a boot dubbing loop on it. No. I mean, you could, but again, trying to keep it at a minimal amount of time.
Right. Okay. So there's actually a roadkill squirrel out in front of my house. I could run out and snip some fibers and throw it into this dubbing if you want to wait a couple of minutes. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I think that everybody here would love to go if you could bring the camera with you while you go in hard along the back of the side of the road.
I'll use it straight. So I'm just.
I like it. Not take away. He's got it.
Just grab a little bit of this stuff there, and going to dub it onto my thread, and I'll dub it. I'm gonna back this camera up so you can see a little more. There. I can see it. And so is that about the right amount right there?
Yeah. Or and remember, you can always, with dubbing, you can always add more too,
Yeah. And loose, right? You want it loose or relatively loose, not really tight.
Yeah. I mean, again, you're not trying to make rope with it. You are trying to be able to have, but if it goes down a little tight, you can always use your bodkin to, pop out little bits of it or a brush.
Okay. So now I'm going to wind it And should I go all the way to the bead with this?
Pretty close. I like, I like there, and I almost use sort of the red collar to sort of, lock it all down. So you can, I'd get another turn in there, and then.
Okay. So you don't want to leave any space for that red collar. You want.
I almost use the red collar to push it back.
Okay, gotcha. So I've got too much there. So what I'm going to do is just back it up and pull some of it off.
There, yeah, like a boss right there. Perfect.
Okay. And now I'm going to whip finish.
Yep.
Quick. I'm only going to do like 3 turns because I'm going to cover this up. And it'll hold because I'm going to put a little head cement or UV cure on there afterwards. And now I'm going to get and I'm using 140 denier 3.0 red thread. Do you use 6.0 for this?
You know what? I actually do think I use a 3/0.
Okay.
To be honest, and sometimes I just use red floss. It just depends.
Okay.
I actually have found like the darker red thread is more like I'm just trying to add a little bit more contrast rather because we already have so much pink kind of bouncing around. I don't want to have like a bright red floss. But I find that the darker thread, it's almost like a gill, if you will, even though that's not where a gill would be.
It's a hot spot.
Yeah, it's a hot spot on a already multi-triggered fly.
Okay, so I'm going to just take my thread and come right in behind the bead, right?
Yep, you got it.
And maybe like 3 or 4 turns.
Yep.
To lock the thread in. And then do you just whip finish right now?
Yep. I try, and it's for me because I'm gonna goo that pretty good. It's like a turn or 2. I try to keep it again, not let the knot get too big on me or anything like that. Whatever works for. There you go.
And then pull on that thread a little bit so that when you clip it, it jumps back into the lines.
Tom, we have a question actually for Tom and Jesse. We have a question from Adam asking, what's the best indicator fly to drop this fly off of?
The one that the trout might eat.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's good. I mean, so in a size 14, and given that this has got a 3.2 mil bead on it, it's going to be hard for any natural fibered fly or even subnatural, fly to be able to float this unless it's got foam on it. It tied in some smaller patterns like a 16 with a 2.7 or a 2.3 mil bead. You could probably drop it off like a CDC caddis with a lot of different shake or, different, whatever your preferred floatants are.
Parachute Adams would work.
Yeah. But for the most part, certainly in this size and even the size smaller, you'll have a harder time to float this under a dry. This is truly in its form shown here, a tight line Euro fly that's meant to be heavy. So, and it's definitely supposed to be kind of tapping the bottom for the most part.
So I would say like chubby Chernobyl, a foam hopper.
Yep.
Anything with Chernobyl ant, anything with foam will hold this up pretty well.
Yeah, if you type it the 66 on a 16 with a 2.3 mil, you could absolutely put it under like a CDC, a caddis, or like a Parachute Adams, or some of those larger, bushier, dry wolves, some attractor patterns. Yeah, like the brook trout will smoke this fly too because it's got a little color and all that, and cutthroat too. So like putting them on a dry dropper rig in some of those areas is always good.
Mm-hmm. So there are all kinds of ways you can brush this dubbing. You can just use your bodkin or your dubbing needle. I I have like a dozen different dubbing. I have this one that has a little Velcro. I have this one. It's hard to see, but it has little serrations on the end. I have this one that has a little brush and a comb. And one that I reach for more often than not is a piece of male Velcro on the end of a popsicle stick.
And that's exactly right, Tom. It's got the little hooks
and I
on
have,
it.
I have a bigger one, a smaller one. It works really well. So
Joe asked if you could, if you can't get the color bead, can you paint one with Sally Hansen's? You could. I would also recommend just as much trying it with a silver bead. The silver bead works really well, and in the contrast is with the pink. But if you can't, you could paint it. I've always had success with that sort of translucent anodized versus like a solid, painted pink. But if you can sort of get that look, it would work as well. There's multiple places to get those pink beads.
I'm going to back up a little bit here so people can see on this, and then we just brush it, right?
Yeah, just trying to pull it out, make it a little bit, make it a little bit more, it's the poor man's CDC collar.
And this is an imitation of legs, emerging wings, whatever.
Yep.
That too much?
It's a little long. You can come back and trim it if you want to. It's just trying to make it a little swimmy.
I think I made that red collar a little bit too big. What do you think?
It's a little, yeah, sure, a little bit. I mean, and we lost a little bit of dubbing there, but it's not.
Oh, you know what happened? Yeah, that slipped back.
Oh, yeah, the hook got it. The little Velcro brush probably.
Hell, I'm going to redo this.
Yeah, you can go right back over that if you need to.
I'm just going to get this out of here. I'm going to redo this totally.
Well, it's actually a really good example too, that you can get to a point right there where you sort of get close on a fly and that stuff's not going to come up. So you can cut that out like you're doing right there and come right back over with a little more dubbing, a little bit more collar.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I can't get that red thread out of there, but I don't have a razor blade handy. There we go. This is how you fix a fly, guys. Well, I'm just going to cut that. I'm going to go back with my olive thread. I'm going to add a little more dubbing. I probably should have used 6/0 thread. All right. See if we can get this to. Two whips. And a couple turns, 3 turns, and a whip. Maybe, yeah, I'm going to stick with 2 there.
I like it. I think it's a good call.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm gonna brush it again.
And just tap it, I mean, just to get some of that stuff up. Like that's really good on the top. Yeah. Just trying to get a little bit of These.
So I got
want.
too aggressive with it the last time, huh?
Oh, that's so. That last one, that was perfect, Tom.
Just kind of.
I just like a little bit of like.
Yeah.
That's woo. No, I want to eat that now.
Okay, I'm done. Now it's better. Get in close, see how it looks. Oh, yeah. All right, and then we're just going to add a little tiny drop of UV Cure. Make sure there's no fuzzies on your dubbing needle. Hit it with the light. Now that red is very subtle. How's that look, Jesse?
As they say, that dog will hunt.
Quick, durable,
effective.
You don't want it to fall apart before you lose it on a rock. Right?
Well, that's part of the thing. It's like, these patterns take you, once you're cranking on them, 5 minutes, maybe 10 tops. You want to be able to tie 20 of them in an hour if you can. That's if you get all your beads and everything lined up.
Yep. Well, it's a great pattern. I've used it myself, and it works. You can put the bead on a bodkin and put a lighter up to it to remove some of the sheen and give it a cool look, too. Oh, that's a good idea.
I like that.
Yeah, if you do it enough, you could probably turn them nice and matte black. Ed said he tied one that looks a bit better than mine. Good for you, Ed. I am so glad to hear that. Ed's here every week, so Ed must be learning something from Tim Flagler. Certainly not from me. I'm glad yours looks better than mine. Jesse's would look better too.
Yeah, it's takes, it's kind of trying to tie some new patterns, but I honestly like that gist is basically like 90% of my Euro nymphs. I mean, the very simple thin thread body with UV, without UV, with thread ribbing, different color combinations. But for mayfly imitations specifically, that sort of formula is really what I've used for some time, effectively as well. So thin, sinks fast, easy to tie. Pretty straightforward.
Could you comb the dubbing before tying the hotspot? You could do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. To avoid having any kind of issue with thread, sure. Again, I think the squirrel spiky dub in general, the SLF, like naturally those squirrel fiber tails, they want to jump up a little bit more. So, sometimes it's just releasing one or two of those from that got caught in the thread, and you get everything you need right out of it. But when you're brushing like that, I think could work pretty well.
Here's kind of an off topic, but not really on a C. If we were to put a CDC collar on here, Martin's asking, do you have a preferred method to do these?
I would admittedly say I'm not the best at working with CDC. I would probably strip away a little bit of that top of the feather and tie it down and then sort of come around it a few times. And with CDC, the tough thing about CDC is like you can get ones that have like the tiniest feathers and they give you too short of a collar, or you get ones that like they're longer than your tail. And really, I'm just trying to get about no more than the length of the shank of the hook, and only a few of them that are that long. So with all CDC, I always kind of do that thing where I pull a little bit off the top, tie it down, and spin it once. And if that's usually all I want to get, it's really hard to get the right size CDC. However, you can do that, and it'll give it great movement, especially if you're intending on jigging, the fly, or if you're planning on you fishing a little bit more mid-column, or when there's a lot of emerging insects. Then I have a few of those that are pretty of that pattern with CDC, and I actually tie it with like a silvery CDC to add a little more contrast. But it's that's how I would go about it, but I don't use it that often. I definitely tie it with it, but I don't use them that often.
So you tie in a bunch and you just kind of let it roll all the way around the hook?
Yes, I basically palmer it.
Distribution. Oh, you actually wind the CDC.
Yes.
Okay.
So what I would do is I would cut to the end of the dubbing, and then before I put the collar down, I would tie in and palmer the CDC once, check, see where I look, and then if I'm good there, then tie it down and then put the red collar in. And so it's the red collar is just in front of the bead, or just behind the bead, and then the CDC, and then the dubbing, and then the rest of the body.
So you wind it like a hackle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I was thinking you just took a clump of it and tied it in and just kind of let it roll around like a distribution wrap, which is difficult to do.
Well, I mean, you could honestly kind of dub CDC too if you wanted to, right? You can cut it off, and you can or you can make a dubbing loop, or you can do all the different I forget what's that CDC tool that like makes a really awesome dubbing loop. Oh gosh, I can't think. It's like the patine or something like that makes a really cool CDC sort of dubbing loop. But again, dubbing loops are awesome. They're great for spay flies, but they just take a lot of time. It's not worth it on a Eurofly, in my opinion.
Yeah. Ed wants to know, on multiple nymph rig, would you use this as a point fly?
Yeah, most of the time. To be honest, I'll be kind of very candid. Like typically I'm like grub, caddis, stonefly as my point, and then I fish a lot of mayfly imitations up. If this fly was crushing it, I might put it on the point and actually run 2 different variations of it. A lot of the times I'm going to have some sort of caddisy, grubby kind of fly on the bottom with this riding up off the bottom. So not necessarily on the point, but you can.
You could use split thread and a clip for the CDC, as Mark suggested. That would be more work than I would like to do, but you could.
Yep, absolutely.
Graham asked, when does trout season close in the U.S.? Graham, it varies by state in the U.S. and also by region and also by river. Some rivers are open year-round. Some rivers have extended seasons. So you need to decide where you're going and then find out, because it's going to vary. It's going to vary.
There's a lot of year-round water, especially in the Rockies.
A lot of year-round water, yeah.
And the great state of New York, which is adjacent to Vermont, is now about to go almost completely open year-round with different regulations. And Vermont is looking like they're going to do that as well. So.
Oh, really? Vermont's
going
to do it too?
Potentially this year. So, like starting this coming year, starting January 1st, with catch and release and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Any other questions before we let Jesse go? Jesse, do you use split thread often for dubbing?
No, I don't necessarily. I am I would call myself a panic tire. Like, oh my gosh, I'm out of all my good flies, and I need to sit down and spend a day where I tie like 150 flies, and then don't want to do it again for a couple months. I would also say that I'm very utilitarian. As much as I love to tie and did at times tie very extravagant patterns, I've really tried to simplify it. And very specifically with my nymphs, I'll put a little bit more, time and effort into dries and things like that. But for my nymphs, like they're going to be very cut and dry, cut and wet.
What Mark wants to know what size Euro rod.
Ooh, Mark, I love me some 2-weights these days. I'll tell you that. Depends on the water size, depends on what you're trying to get away with. You know, if you got a big open fishery where you can get away with an 11-foot rod and a 3-weight and you need that, then yeah. But I love the sensitivity of light rods. Like a 10-foot 2 is fantastic. You can fish really light tippet. I am the happiest person in the world if I can catch, 12-inch fish in 12-inch deep, riffly fast water, by the basket load, if you will. But, it's not all like that. And sometimes you do need a bigger rod, and sometimes you do need to fish heavier tippet, and sometimes you need a longer rod. So for me, 10-foot 2, but that 11-foot 3-weight blackout H3 is, I think, our finest nymphing rod made yet. So that one is the other rod I use pretty consistently on big water.
Oh, and by the way, if you all have more questions about Euro nymphing, I'm going to be doing a live event with George Daniel on Thursday night at 8:00 for Orvis Days. So if you want to get some more info on Euro nymphing, you want to try it, tune in on Thursday night.
Don't miss that. The professor George Daniel and the icon Tom Rosenbauer talking European nymphing trade secrets, folks.
Well, I don't have any trade secrets because I'm not very good at it. I'm still learning.
That's not true.
George is, yeah, it is true. So George is going to be doing most of the talking. And yes, Joe, you can use a 9-foot 5-weight. You're going to not have the same sensitivity, and you're going to have a little bit more trouble throwing that long leader with just throwing just the leader as you do in Euro nymphing, because it won't load with just the weight of the flies, whereas a dedicated Euro rod will flex and will load and be able to deliver that. But you certainly can Euro nymph with any rod your little heart desires.
And I would also say, circling all the way back, that this pattern doesn't exclusively need to be a European nymphing pattern. It can be tied on a standard shank hook, nymph hook. It can be tied on curved hooks. It can be tied exactly how it is on a jig hook and fished on a traditional, 9-foot 5-weight, 9-foot 6-weight, 10-foot 6-weight, whatever you want, under an indicator. And I still firmly believe that barbless hooks penetrate better. They stick. It's just a little bit different, way to fight them with barbless hooks, but they're better for everybody in the long run.
Fish do throw barbless beadheads quicker than they throw barb beadheads.
That is why there is an art to fighting fish with barbless hooks. I believe that firmly. And it is a little bit more challenging if you have an indicator causing drag underneath the water as well. But it's actually something that I don't think people discuss enough, talk about rod angles and how, barbless, how you interact with barbless hooks and such, and fish in that situation. But I hope we can do or somebody does a Facebook Live or a podcast or something like that regarding that soon, because I think it's a really interesting topic.
That's a great idea, Jesse. I'm going to sign you up.
I can offer a little bit. I've learned a few tricks. I watched Cody Bergdorf basically bring a fish from like 25 yards downstream in fast, heavy water right back up to him. And he taught me a little trick to do that. And it's worked most of the time. So stay tuned. That's like my little, there's my little hook for you.
Okay. You're going to be pressed into service for that.
Sounds like a fun one.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. I know you have to go to a meeting. Appreciate you coming on today and sharing this pattern with us. And thank you, everyone, for your great questions. It really means a lot to us that you come in here and and listen to us. And Ed, congratulations on tying a slim Pinkie better than mine. Good job. I don't know who judged that, though. I don't know who judged that, Ed. Did you have Tim Flagler in the background judging that one, maybe? But anyway, I believe you that yours looks better than mine. So good job.
Thank you, everyone. It's fun. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. And what am I tying next week? I forgot. Am I tying Puglisi spawning shrimp next week? Am I tying a bonefish?
Ooh.
No, wait a minute. No, is that a Flagler thing?
I don't think you've sent me what you're tying on Monday. It's November already. But yeah, the Flagler tie-off's a little later.
Flagler tie-off's a little later. Okay, I think I'm tying. Well, I don't know what I'm tying. So you have to watch Facebook or tune in next Monday and be surprised because we are tying next Monday. And don't forget Thursday night with George Daniel. All right, everybody.
Happy birthday, Jesse.
Thank you
so much.
Jesse. Take care, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.